an intro this week.
Hello.
I'm Barbara Tanner Wallace. I'm here with my bestie, Donna Allward. Long time no see, Donna.
Yeah, I know. It's been like a whole week.
A whole week. Today we have a special episode, though, because we have Janna G. Noelle. Did I pronounce it right?
Yes.
Okay. She's joining us. She's one of the co-founders of hashtag HF Chit Chat, which is a Twitter and now Instagram community.
That's right.
For historical fiction authors. We're going to talk a little bit more about that so people can know about the community. But first, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and what you write?
Sure. So my name is Janna. I am a Canadian historical fiction writer. I write, I guess, sort of historical women's fiction with a bit of adventure, kind of like the book we're going to be talking about today. I'm a querying author, and yeah, I'm the co-founder and co-host of HF Chit Chat, as you said.
Well, and you write, you're writing ancient Greece and medieval England, right?
Right. Yes.
Those are not super hot times. What made you pick that? I mean, only because everyone writes World War II right now, and
I know. I think it's just what I've always been interested in. My dad was a big lover of medieval fiction, so he got me into that. And ancient Greece. I mean, there's a lot of retellings that are being published right now, so I like those.
That's true. That is hot.
I like those. I'm not writing a retelling, but I don't know. I just like the time period. I like pre-modern, ancient times. I just find it really fascinating. And I think also because there's a bit of a like epic fantasy connection to those eras, and I was a big reader of epic fantasy when I was growing up. So I think that I just come by the love of it naturally.
Yeah, well, that's good. I think of like Ken Follett and the Pillars of the Earth.
Pillars of the Earth, yeah, I love that.
When you say epic, I think of like big, thick books.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Well, you're the one that recommended this month's book, which is Things Past Telling by Sheila Willams. I'm going to bring the cover up here because it's so pretty. Yeah. And this is not something that we probably would have picked up, just on our own. And I'm so glad that you recommended it because, wow. So for our viewers, I just want to tell a little bit about the book, which basically chronicles a woman's life, Maryam Grace, and from about 1759, I think, is when the first date. And she lives to be 112. So it spans this very long life, and she is captured by slave traders when she's 10, and then it follows her life all the way through to old age and emancipation, and so it's huge in scope and yet very, very intimate. So but anyway, I think we're going to have a big consensus here about the book.
I think it's going to be a big love fest. But
yeah,
I think so.
But what made you pick the book? Because first I'm going to say that we had Sid Young on, who's also from HF Chit Chat, and she picked a book that we wouldn't have read either. And like both times they've been home run books. So we have to, and then we had Gabriella's book like a couple months ago.
Right.
So
yeah.
So well, I'm sure we're going to love Alaska, but we had to set the bar high for her.
Yeah. Well, I heard about this book through HF Chit Chat, and I feel like that's one of the really good things about the community is that during our chats, we will often ask people, what are you reading? What are you looking forward to? And people will post about books that we might not have necessarily heard about. And this was the case for this one. So it was Piper Hughley who her own book, By Her Own Design, is also excellent about Anne Lowe. But she posted about this book, and I'm always interested in supporting Black authors and reading Black historical fiction. So I saw her post and thought, I don't know this book, let me look it up. And so I looked it up, and it comped it to Outlander and Barracoon, and I was immediately intrigued, because Outlander is a great adventure story, and you don't often see great adventure stories featuring Black characters. So I was just intrigued, and I just started reading, and I was hooked from the very beginning. So
yeah, her voice is amazing.
It is.
I got Serious Not Worthy vibes when I was reading that. Like,
100%.
It was fantastic. And just so you know, Piper used to be a part of Step Into Story until she hit it big.
Oh, so, I didn't know that. Okay.
It seems to be a trend with us that authors who are who join us and hang out then become too busy because they're too famous. So
yeah, well, we did buy her own design last year. We read
that book was excellent.
It really was.
And she definitely needs to do more historical fiction, I told her.
It really was. This was a big yay for me. And I think because within the first few pages, I was just blown away by her voice and by the imagery. And it was just so lyrical and beautiful and very distinct and again, intimate. And, you know, you just sort of get immersed in her world right in the very beginning, and then you never come out of it until the end. So I think more than anything, just that skill and that voice is what just pulled me through.
How about you, Janna?
Yeah,
yay, but why?
Yes. So for me, it was a couple of things. For me, number one, it was the fact that it was that adventure story. Like, I love adventure stories, and you know, having one with a Black character, with a Black woman as the main character was very exciting for me. Also, on top of the voice, I really liked the way that language played a role in the story. This is a character who speaks many languages and has many different words for things. And, you know, the way that she used that throughout the story and how her linguistic ability helped her along her journey was really fascinating. And I also really like the fact that we got to see a good chunk of her life before she became enslaved. Because often in stories about enslaved people, we join the story after they've already been enslaved for a while or they've been born into slavery, where for her, she was born free in Africa and she had a whole family life and relationships with her sisters and her parents. And we got to see a lot of that before she became enslaved. So it kind of just gave her a fuller life besides just her enslavement. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we were actually talking about that beforehand, that being a slave was only one part of her story. And while it played a huge role in her life, there was so much more to her. And you really felt like the loss of her family and then the loss of her second family. And what I liked about it is we talk all the time about how good historical fiction features ordinary people in extraordinary situations. And I think in a way this kind of flipped it, because she kind of told her story like she was nobody special. And really, she was a very extraordinary woman. And it was like her life was like a string of tiny, extraordinary events that she saw as ordinary. But it was just a string of tiny, extraordinary ones that showed how strong a survivor she was, and that she was anything but ordinary. And it just kind of flipped the switch, I think, on how historical fiction usually presents people as rising to an occasion as opposed to being perfectly capable of an occasion and leading it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. I agree with that.
So she was definitely a survivor.
Definitely, yes.
So was there anything that surprised you about the book, Janna?
So are we allowed to talk about specific plot points?
Yeah, we can be very general. So, but too much. But yeah, we can talk about those.
Well, it does mention in the blurb, so I think it's okay. So the part with the pirates surprised me because I don't usually read blurbs of books until after I've read them. I really like to go in just not knowing much. And so I didn't expect the part with the pirates. And that was I really liked that because, again, that adventure and also the role that she played with the pirates really made sense for what she could do. And just the relationship she had with them. I really liked that.
Yeah. And honestly, it was kind of nice seeing her have that sort of an adventure before becoming enslaved. And again, I think it's because, like, the one surprise for me was the book was 340 pages. And I'm like, how do you fit 100 years of life into 340 pages? And yet she did it. And she did it seamlessly without feeling like there was anything missing in the pacing. And so, you know, her time as an enslaved woman was probably half the book. But the rest of the book was actually before and then, you know, a little bit after. And so I was just that surprised me that it was so seamless in how she did that. I think that again, writer's envy, because I'm not sure anyone else could. I can't imagine doing that.
No, and I was surprised at how intimate it was. I mean, well, first you pick up the book and they're telling you she's going to be with pirates, and then she lives 112 years. You know, okay, what am I getting into? But she lived through the War of 1812. She lived through the Civil War. She lived through all these things, and none of that's really mentioned except as a quick aside. You know, because it was very focused on her, and it was a very intimate story about her life. And I really liked that. It surprised me, because I think when I think epic, I thought it was going to be more sprawling, kind of dealing with all the things going on. So it surprised me that it was much more smaller in scope. And but I liked it, because I think it felt more honest in a way.
Well, I mean, it was really in keeping with what she would be aware of. Like, there would be wars happening. She wouldn't know all of the fine details of what's happening in wars because she wasn't there. So,
right. And for a lot of people in general, things happen, but doesn't necessarily impact their immediate life. What's, you know, their day to day. They're focused on trying to get through the day to day activities and their day to day problems.
It did read very much like memoir.
It did.
Yes.
You know.
Really. Or more like she was telling it to somebody, not even a memoir, more like she was sitting by the fire and relaying the stories, which is why I think I liked her voice so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So Janna, I have to ask, did you have a favorite scene?
Favorite scene? Trying to think. So I read it back in January. So let me see. Let me check. I did make some notes on the book.
I got a message from you. You're like, I've started it. It's blowing me away. That's
yes.
Yeah. I gotta say, I got it. It didn't get delivered to my house until yesterday. So I started it yesterday afternoon and I finished it and I took time off and watched hockey last night. I'm not gonna lie. And then I get up this morning and I'm like, I'm finishing, and it did not. It was a very fast read for me. Like, I really couldn't put it down, and I'd look up and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I just read 20 pages, but I just got so sucked in by the language that.
Yeah, I both read it in ebook and also audio. I kind of did a combo thing. And it's really,
audio would have been fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really good in audio.
Oh, I bet. It's, like I said, it's made like someone's telling the stories. So
right.
In audio, it sounded fantastic.
And the narrator does all of the accents of all the various people, like of all the different linguistic speakers that she encounters. So it was really good. But in terms of favorite scenes, so I mean, one of my favorite scenes was, again, with the pirates, when she does her first interpreting job for the pirates. I really liked that scene because of, number one, what she is able to tell them, the kind of surprise bit of information she's able to tell Caesar, the pirate captain. And also because that scene, it really just showed that she is able to make it in the world. Like, she had a lot of doubts before, and that really kind of solidified that, yes, she is a player in her own life, and she's able to carry on without her family. So there was that scene. Another scene, I wouldn't say, I liked the way it was written. It was a very difficult scene or difficult sequence, was when she was on the ship doing the Middle Passage. Like, that whole sequence, the way it was written, it was just so evocative and so heart-wrenching, and it was so wonderfully written, but very difficult to read.
Yeah. We were saying she was very blessed by having some very strong women in her life.
Yes. Her
sister and Marie Catherine, who taught her skills that helped her be a survivor, and like seemed to instinctively know this is what you need to have some skills to get through. And like, her sisters, I actually grew to really like the sister, and I got very teary of the sister's story. Because she really understood what was going on, and I'm trying to do it without saying spoilers, which is so
right.
But she understood when they're on the ship what their fate is, and she's trying so hard to give her little sister as much gifts and as much skills as she can to protect her.
Right. And I like seeing the evolution of her and her sister's relationship, like from when they start off at home to when they end up on the Middle Passage, because it really did change.
Yeah, I love that one. And I was gonna say, I was torn between a couple scenes. The couple scenes that stuck with me was one is where she's visited by a runaway slave.
Right, yeah.
And he's telling that story, which is relaying a real story. When you go back and read the author notes, you're like, oh my God, all this, you know. And that was a very haunting scene that she painted. Right. And I thought that one was really good. And then I have to admit, I said to Donna, I got so teary at the end because it ends on a very good note.
It does. It has a very nice ending. And
that made me very happy. So it was.
I actually didn't really have a favorite scene, but there was, I'm a big fan of the rule of three. So, you know, you bring something in and then there's something to do with that 3 times throughout your story. So for me, it was when she had her first baby, and this is going to be slightly spoilery, but not. And the circumstances that led to her being pregnant, and then so when she has that baby, and Marie Catherine is there, and she tells her that it'll be different when it's with a man that she loves, and so that's the first time. And then she repeats it again when she gets married because it's different with a man that she loves. And then she repeats it a 3rd time with her final relationship. And which I was super happy about, actually. I really liked that relationship because I felt like despite their differences, they came together almost as equals. Not quite. Quite. But that
there was a big thing in there. Yeah,
it was genuine affection and respect between the two of them, and as shown by his actions later. So but yeah, I really liked how that sort of happened, like all the way through, and that not all of her experiences were horrible. Because when you see how many other women died in childbirth or lost babies or just they were used as breeders, that's just so important.
That whole concept was maybe not.
Yeah. So to see that she actually had, 2 men that she loved and loved her, I really liked that. That was probably my favorite.
Well, it's very clear she had a very full life. Wasn't
definitely,
was there was a lot of good, there was a lot of bad. It was very full, which is what you'd expect at 112 years old. But
and I liked how she was able to constantly reinvent herself. Like, she had a very full life. She had, wonderful things happen in her life. She had terrible things happen in her life, and several times she was, at the depths of her despair, and she was able to reinvent herself and to rise up from that depression. So I really liked that. Like, it really did show her resilience and her strength.
But there's a sorrow through the whole thing too, when she starts talking about time. And I think there's a passage where she talks about how her memories are fading, and that there's things happened that you thought you would never forget, and then time passed and suddenly you don't remember it as sharply as you thought you would. And then there's like some of her family or home, and that whole
the before time,
but the whole passage of time and age and growing older and things just fading away. It was very sorrow. It was a lot of sorrow when she, very sad when she spoke about that. And you really felt the loss of everything that she wasn't remembering anymore. And, she lost a lot. And there's not a time when they had photos or anything else. So she can't conjure up people's faces and things. And you realize, like, wow, how much she didn't have anymore that had been there, and how she lost it. And once her memories started to fade, she was never going to get it back. And that really hit me a lot when she talked about that. It could be because I'm a woman of a certain age also. And the idea when she talks about growing old was really like, oh, yeah, I get that. But that really, really hit me when she would talk about her memories fading. And that there's one point where she says, I can't remember my mother's face. And I was like, oh, that's awful.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine not, being able to look at a photo or anything like that.
I know Barb and I were talking about this before you popped in, and I'm particularly interested to get your take on this because I guess it came from a review.
Yeah, I like to go on and read the bad reviews because just to see what people actually had a problem with. When I love a book and you're like, I can't find a flaw, you go looking to like.
Yeah,
yeah, I read bad reviews sometimes too.
Yeah,
and Barb was saying that one of the reviews said that they thought the book sugar-coated slavery.
that they gave her 1 star and they didn't like. The 2 comments were, one, she thought it was too much telling. And I was like, well, that's the story.
That's what the book is called. Things past telling.
Right. No, but, and then the other thing, yeah, she said, I think it's sugar-coated slavery. And I disagree because first off, I don't think it was a book about slavery. It was a book about this woman who was a slave and she suffered a great deal. So I don't think it sugar-coated what she went through or what her circle went through. But yeah, we're curious to see what you thought. I mean, we all have different opinions and we all
and we come at it from a very different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious as to the race of the reviewer.
Yeah, I couldn't tell from the picture. I was trying to see.
I don't know. I feel like, you know, oftentimes authors write books for certain people. And I feel like this book was written for Black readers. And, you know, as a as a Black reader, I do read a fair number of books about slavery, and, you know, some of them are more harrowing to read than others. I think that Black readers understand the horrors of slavery, and we don't need to see it portrayed graphically on the page in every book that we read. And also, like you said, Barb, it was not a story about slavery. It was a story about her. And a story about her life, her journey, all of the unique skills that she acquired over her life and how she was able to apply them. So, you know, in amongst a backdrop of enslavement. So I disagree. I disagree with that review. And I really loved the story just because it wasn't so graphically portraying of slavery. And I mean, it was in there. It was in there in subtle language.
Like hard things to read in there that people went through. Stuff with, is it Durfee? I can't remember.
Durfee, yeah. Durfee.
Oh, yeah. What a horrible
He was
man.
horrible,
and
yes.
More horrible than I knew until she was delivering some of those babies. And you know, some horrible things happened.
Well, she seemed very accepting, like, this is how it is. And you had to accept that because it wasn't going to change. And so I think she just accepted that, you know, at this point in time, this was her life. And yet at times you would see that sorrow kind of seep through and when she would miss home or when she had Alexander and she realized that, like, she at the time remembered what it was like to be free, but realized that he never would, and how she wanted that to change for him. So, I mean, I didn't find it sugar-coated slavery. I just found it very poignant in parts. Well, as far as her, because we've all, as a white woman, I've seen and read movies and books that depicted the horrors of slavery. And I just felt like this was more. It's going to sound weird, but it felt more human than some of the depictions that we see. And so, I don't know, I responded to that.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'll go back to, it was such an intimate book and you really loved her. And I think, I mean, obviously, Sheila Willams is an incredibly gifted writer. And clearly want to go back and read. She's got one of her books is a Netflix movie, and I'm like, okay, better watch that now.
Oh, really?
I read it in her bio, and I can't remember which one, but it's got bio. I think it's now I can't even remember her name. It's the
we'll
woman
put it in the show notes.
We will, because it's one of the women from The Help and Perfect Figures, and
Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures, not Perfect Figures.
Okay.
And I can't remember her name. And she's. But anyways, I think Sheila Willams is an incredibly skilled writer, and I obviously made very conscious choices of how she wanted to portray this. Like I said, she didn't touch about the Civil War. She didn't touch on the bigger issues because that's not what the book was. The book was about motherhood and family and survival and loss. And I think that, you know, she focused on what the book was about. So
yes, I agree. I agree that Sheila Willams is a fantastic author, and she is not online anywhere. I've searched. I haven't found her on Twitter. Right? I haven't found her on
She's
Facebook.
Got a website, and that's it.
Yeah, I'm like, Sheila, where are you? I want to tell you how much I love this book.
I would, after reading this, I would pick up another in a heartbeat.
Same.
Oh, yeah.
Her writing is just so, it's just so beautiful. It's beautiful writing. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it was interesting because apparently this was the New York Times picked this last summer as a recommended read.
Really?
And that was the first I'd heard that. I was like, you know, because I worked at Barnes and Noble, and for a while last year, and there were authors that we pushed. Her name never came up. I don't even think we had it in the store.
When was this one released? I'm sorry, I don't know this.
I think it came out in May of 2022.
Okay. Yeah, it was just last year.
I was not a bookseller at that time.
But it was not. It did not get the same kind of buzz as say Vanessa Riley's or Piper's got. And I was surprised. And then I said, "Oh no, New York Times did." So shame on me for not knowing this. But
I would totally read Mother first.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't know anything about it until Piper mentioned it during the HF Chit Chat, and you know, I feel like this is just indicative of what happens to a lot of marginalized and especially BIPOC authors in publishing, is that they just don't get the promotion of their books. Nobody knows about them. Nobody reads them. And then they say, oh, you know, books about people of color don't sell. Well, of course they're not going to sell if no one knows it exists.
Right. Or they pick one or two authors that they decide, you know, and they feel like, okay, well, we've promoted some because we promoted those two. And yeah. And it's we were saying offline, this is one of those great examples of why own voices is so important, because this was a kind of a book that a white woman couldn't write and give justice to. We couldn't do this. And, you know, it is a shame that it didn't get the buzz it does. And I'm going to scream it from the rooftop.
We're going to give it a little amplification.
I'm now a fangirl. So,
but yeah, no,
there's something about people who know how to do language. Like, you know, it's just.
Oh, yeah. The audiobook was just so good. For that.
Like on a word level, it's just.
And the paperback just came out, so people can go out now buy it, and it's affordable. Like I get
the paperback. It came yesterday.
Excellent.
For that reason, I'm cheap about hardcovers, but now it's paperback.
It was so easy to binge read, though. So easy to binge read. Like
it just pulls you along.
It does. But you actually, I don't know. I learned a lot. And
what's your takeaway, Barb?
Yeah, I think I took away from it, like I said, and I think it gave me even a different view, because a lot of the books that I've read about slavery give me this one big picture. Like you said, this was written for a Black audience. And I think it was important for white people to be reading it too, because I think it did show a much more, it gave a lot of depth to this woman's experience. And I really came away knowing more and feeling more about what I felt what she was experiencing, as opposed to being told about slavery or being told what happened to people. I really lived it with her. And I think it was, I got a lot out of it. And I got a lot out of, it made me think a lot about motherhood and the whole midwifing and what people in the 19th century, regardless, what women in the 19th century went through to have a baby. And, you know, and they were pumping them out.
Well, they didn't have any birth control back then, so.
Oh, no. And risking their lives every single time. And, you know, some of the stuff
one scene, actually, certainly not my favorite scene, but one scene that really stuck with me, where she attends to someone who is having a baby. And I don't know if you guys know the scene that I'm talking about, and I don't want to spoil it, but it's pretty brutal. And the lengths that some women would go to ensure that they don't have babies again.
Right. Yes, I know what one you're talking about.
What you mean. Yeah, and that was very visceral. I think if I were to take anything away, again, a lot of times when we look at slavery stories, which we've now all agreed this one isn't. It deals with a finite amount of time, and it doesn't consider the journeys that took Black people from their homes and their families and transported them in horrible conditions across an ocean and put them in horrible conditions again, took away any autonomy. And I think by showing how that's how her life began and that journey, like this is about a journey, and it ripples and resonates through everything. And it makes it so that this isn't, she wasn't just a slave. She was a whole woman. She was a child. She was a daughter. She was a sister. She was a wife. Like she was so many different things, not just a slave.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, it's weird to kind of dissect this, and it happens because it's a Black author and a topic about slavery and all that. But this was just a good book about a really rich, full life. And it was just an enjoyable read. I mean, it not enjoyable and fun, but it was a good read, and it's just something people should read if they enjoy really good writing and a good book.
It resonates, right? And
yeah, I think it would resonate with anybody.
I think so. I felt like it was trying to make sure that people know that there is the before time. Yeah. That these stories aren't lost, and that there is more to the story than the plantation.
Exactly. Like it does have interesting aspects of her life in it too, like pirates and midwives and wise women, and she does a lot of cool stuff.
And healing and the Underground Railroad, and
and I love that I went back and read the author notes, and I love that she took a lot of this. She said she did a lot of reading about midwife accounts, so a lot of it's very accurate, which reading it, she did her research, but a lot of it was family stories that she intertwined in that. And I was like, I love that she went and caught her own family stories and put them down. And I'm like, oh, wow. So, you felt like you were actually reading a little piece of history. It was true historical fiction.
Right. And there was a real 112-year-old woman in the Ohio census rolls. That was where that was mentioned in the note as well. That was where she got the idea to write a character like this based on a real woman.
And a real pirate. Apparently he was real too.
Well, and do you realize too that at one point he was like, I didn't know many people who lived past 35. And I'm thinking, girl, you have no idea. You're going to be 112. Like,
I think at 11 or 12, she was done. She
was like, I'm 40, I'm old. And I'm like,
yeah, like they're just getting started.
Halfway there yet.
I know. I was like, I feel you though.
So, Janna, if you were to tell anybody, like our audience, any one thing that you would really want them to know about this book, what would you want to tell them?
I mean, I think what you have been saying is that, and what I mentioned at the beginning, is that there is life outside of enslavement, that she is a person. She has all of these relationships before her enslavement, during, after. She has all of these relationships. She has all of this life history, this life experience, and she is living her life through a period of enslavement, but that is not what defines her. So it really is a way of understanding slavery based on the types of experiences that some people might have had that weren't only about violence and not only about violence and abuse and harm and things like that. Like, there were still families, there was still love, there were still friendships, and it's just a way of seeing that and a way of dramatizing that in a really engaging story.
Yeah, I think it kind of reminds you that, being a slave is a part of their identity, but they're people. Yeah. And, love and cry and all these other things. And I think sometimes history books make everything one-dimensional. So the more you can humanize it, it just makes it resonate more and teaches you more.
Exactly. And that's what I mean when I say that this story was really written from a black author's gaze. because often it is that white gaze that just heaps on the abuse, heaps on the trauma, the harrowing experiences, but doesn't see the human underneath it.
And yeah, I agree. And she does it so well. So switching gears though, we'll go move to a happy note. Tell us more about HF Chit Chat, because you guys recently gave a talk about future trends in historical fiction.
Yeah, what readers are looking for. Yeah, so I think that readers are looking for stuff like this. They're looking for new time periods that they're not seeing a lot of, new settings that they're not seeing a lot of. People are also looking for their favorites too. World War I, World War II. It's very mixed, but people still tend to like it. I don't think it's going anywhere, but they're looking for new angles to it. So just new angles to everything. People still like retellings, and I think that people are really just interested in the past and what the past has to teach us about our own present moment.
Okay, so tell us. The group is on Twitter, but it's also now on Instagram.
Well, Twitter's Twitter's not doing so good these days.
Twitter is just Twitter at the moment.
I reached peak Twitter this morning, and I'm like, I'm going to just be following on Instagram now. But
yeah, well, Twitter's new management has really changed things. Like the algorithm is totally different. Like I see differences in engagement now. I see differences in what I'm able to see on my feed. So it doesn't seem as organic as it once did. So like every time we do a chat, I'm like, how's this gonna go? Is anyone gonna see this? Like, it's really disappointing.
But if they do want to join, you have a chat this week.
Yes,
Wednesday,
on Tuesday.
Right?
Tuesday.
Okay, so
Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, and so it's under #HF Chit Chat.
Yeah.
And people are just going to be kind of talking about what they're writing and introducing themselves. You guys usually do that at the beginning of the year and kind of kick it off to see.
Yeah, we call it a histfic mixer. So basically, it's not on any set theme. We're just asking questions about what you're working on, about your writerly habits, just general questions, fun stuff.
Okay, and we should mention that the other three members are Sydney Young, Gabriella Saab. And
Alicia Salnikova-Gilmore.
Thank you. I was going to say, someone please pronounce that. We're actually going to have her on later in the year. She's going to come on right around the time we do. Her book comes out in paperback.
Oh, great!
Yeah, when Witch and the Czar comes out, we did Gabriella's, and it was fantastic.
That was another much love fest.
Right? Yeah, I have to. I haven't got to her book yet, but I have it on my list for this year.
Because again, Russia is not sort of my wheelhouse. Like, it's not my go-to, and it was just brilliantly done.
It's getting on all these lists, so it seems like it's doing really well. It's getting picked on all these lists.
Very complex, very intricately plotted. There's a lot of twists at the end.
I love twists.
Jaw dropped. She did a great job.
She reminds me of Kate Quinn.
Oh wow!
Yeah. And she's only 24. I'm just like, what? Crazy.
All right, last question. What are you reading?
Yes. Oh yeah, what are you reading right now?
I just finished reading a book. I just finished reading my first book by Salman Rushdie.
Oh.
And it's called Victory City. And this takes place in 14th century India. And it's about, so after there's this like insignificant battle happens, and pretty much all the men end up dead. And so all of the women walk into the fire. I guess that's what the widows are expected to do, to follow their husbands. And so this 9-year-old girl watches her mother do this and is obviously very traumatized by this. And subsequently, a goddess inhabits this girl for a while and gives her the power to create a city in which women will thrive and have equality. And the goddess tells her that this girl shall live for 250 years. And over the course of this time, she will see her city thrive and reach its heights, and then it will fail. And then she'll die. Wow. And so it follows. So it's another one of these like epic stories that follows somebody who lives for a very long time. And, it's mythic. It has hints of fantasy in it. I realized after reading it that it many of the people who are mentioned in it, like there is a historical kind of retelling element to it. The city is called Bisnaga, which is a corruption of the Indian name for it, but it means Victory City. So that's what the title is. So there is a lot of history in it as well. But yeah, it was really great. I just finished that, and I'm listening to The Witch of Tin Mountain by Paulette Kennedy.
Oh, I never heard of that one.
So that one, it takes place in Appalachia, and it is about it's a dual timeline story, like a family saga dual timeline story about these women who are witches or have witch-like powers, and this preacher who comes to town, and he's not quite what he seems, and he's causing complications in both of these timelines. So.
Ooh, I'm actually kind of very intrigued on that one. You says The Witch of Tin Mountain?
The Witch of Tin Mountain.
That sounds
really good.
Yeah. And it's another one.
You guys know all the good books.
Another one that the use of language and dialect, because it takes place in Appalachia. So it has it has that dialect in it, and it really as I'm listening to it, so it really comes through. It's well done.
That's what I just read one last year was set in was it Janet Beard did one set in it's called some Legend of Laurel Springs. It's set in Appalachia. Okay. And it's all about folk music.
Oh, that sounds
nice. And
it
starts with this folk song. It starts with a folk song. It's about a man who killed his lover, and then it kind of carries different generations of the same family, and what really happened, and everything happened at Laurel Spring. So she did a really neat job of the Appalachia myths and collecting of the folk language and how it told stories, and it was good.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah. So now that's Tin Mountain. Yeah.
I'm reading Porcelain Moon. I started it just before this came yesterday, and by Janie Chang, that just came out. And again, I'm going to be incredibly blown away by language, and I was telling Barb that starting it and then reading this one really hammered home how we need own voices to be telling these stories, because there is a lyricism and a cadence, and it just bleeds through the page. And so I'm really enjoying that one. So that's what I'm reading right now, is Porcelain Moon.
I'm reading I'm going to bring it down low. No, I'm reading The Lost English Girl by Julia Kelly.
Well, I just finished that, so that's okay.
Yeah, so.
I'm not familiar with that.
It's coming out actually next week.
Oh, yes, okay. I think so.
Yeah, so I have a advanced read off of NetGalley.
Oh, nice.
And I don't actually know what it's about. Julia's coming on, so I should probably read her book. But I liked her other books. So she wrote, The Last Garden of England and The Last Debutante.
It is a young woman who has very domineering parents, and in an act of rebellion gets pregnant, and there's a slap together marriage wedding with the father, who is Jewish.
Oh.
And so the book shows, I'm not going to say any more because Julia's coming on, but the book shows a lot of and it's set in Liverpool. So it shows a lot of even attitudes, anti-Semitism that was alive and well in England at the time, and the struggles that she faced. And then the Lost English Girl, of course, is their daughter, who is evacuated, like so many of the British children were, out of the cities. So it's very good. I enjoyed it a lot. I just finished it on Wednesday or Thursday. Okay.
I know you're also kind of a World War II. So.
I am. I love World War II, so I'm not. I won't lie, but it's not. It's very much, if we're going to compare it in any way, shape, or form to this one, to Things Past Telling, it's very much her story, though. Mm-hmm. It's very much about the characters and not so much about the war. Right. It's very much about the characters. And
which is interesting because, I think we all know the war. We know the history of the war.
We know the blitz happened.
We know how it played out. So it's really seeing those human stories is what we're interested in.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's I really liked it a lot. There was a bit of a shocker sort of toward the end, nice little twist, and so yeah. So do you want me to say what's coming up, Barb?
Yeah, why don't you tell us what's coming up?
Right,
and then
so
we'll
clearly
thank
that's coming up.
profusely for recommending a really great book.
Yeah. We have Julia coming on, and to talk with the Lost English Girl. And it's kind of like Old Home Week. She was one of the founding members of Step Into the Story, so it's going to be nice to have her back.
Nice.
And then the following week on the 21st, we actually have 2 featured authors this month. I'm going to be chatting with Noelle Salazar, and we're going to talk about Angels of the Resistance, which came out last year for her. And plus what's coming up next for her. And then on March 28th, in March's writing room, we're going to be discussing characterization and goal, motivation, and conflict.
Nice.
Yeah.
You've got a lot coming up.
Busy month for us.
So Janna, thank you for coming on, though. I know you and I went back and forth forever trying to get you on, but
thank you so much for inviting me. This was so fun.
And I'm so glad you recommended this book, because I probably would not have picked it up.
Well, now I'm going to read The Witch of Tin Mountain, which also was not on my radar. So you guys are our source for books, apparently.
You are, and Piper always has good recs, so you can always count on Piper to have a good rec.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. Well, we'll do our official thank you all for coming. We hope that if you liked it, you will subscribe to our channel on YouTube or join our Facebook group, which is www.facebook.com/group/step into the story.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.